Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm excited to welcome my first guest on the show, Jerry Perzigian. Jerry is an Emmy Award-winning showrunner, writer, and producer whose credits include The Jeffersons, Married with Children, The Golden Girls, Frasier, The Nanny, Malcolm and Eddie, The Best Damn Sports Show Period, and much more. He teaches comedy script writing at the Jacob Kruger Studio in New York, which is where I met him when I took the course. Welcome, Jerry.
I'm glad to be talking with you.
Very excited to have you on. So the first thing I want to ask you is, you've always said that there's no one right way to get into the industry. So my question for you is, how did you yourself get the start in the writing industry for writing for comedy TV?
I don't know how useful it'll be to answer the question, but I'll tell you the truth. I didn't know anything. I was watching television in Chicago where I grew up, and one day said, I could write this shit. And so I just got in my Volkswagen, drove to California, not knowing anything, not knowing anybody, not knowing what to do or how to do it. And the truth is, if I had known then how heavy the boulder is that we have to roll up such a steep hill to get on the air, I would have been way too afraid. So sometimes being young and stupid is helpful. So when I got there, as I say, I didn't know what to do, but asking questions. In those days, early 80s, you absolutely had to write a spec script that demonstrates your ability to color within the lines, to deliver a script that replicates what already existed on TV. No one at that time would ever consider original pilot written by an unproduced writer. Now, it's almost flipped 180. Now I think a spec script is still a good idea for somebody who's serious about a writing career, but if it came down to just one or the other, I would advocate for the young person in 2018 to write a original pilot. So back to my start, I wrote 4 or 5 pilots, and nobody paid any attention, wrote letters to agents, nobody paid any attention. And I'll mention this specific only because to illustrate that it's different for everybody and that there always is going to be a measure of luck involved. You have to have a lucky break. But as probably everybody listening knows, you can't have the lucky break if you don't have some material to follow up that lucky break. It's true in every industry, especially true in show business. It ain't what you know, it's who you know. So I didn't know anybody, but I was playing basketball with a guy whose girlfriend had a girlfriend who was having an extramarital affair with a producer.
Wow.
So I said, hey, I'm in. So I wrote a spec script for that guy's show.
Gotcha.
Gave it to my friend, who gave it to his girlfriend, who gave it to her girlfriend, who gave it to her sweetheart. Mm-hmm. And it was on his desk when somebody at the Jeffersons, I think for a medical reason, was no more on this, had disappeared.
Right.
So they had a slot to fill. Mm-hmm. These Jeffersons producers, under the same roof was this other man's show. They walked in, saw the script on the corner of the desk, said, what's this? I don't know, some asshole wrote a script for my show. And so the guy I wanted to read it never read it, but the Jeffersons guys read it and called me in, and that's how I got my big toe in the door.
Right, so it was like this serendipitous thing where not necessarily what you had thought, but then it worked out in a much better way.
And it's going to be like that for everybody who is listening.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, so then that was your start working on the Jeffersons, and then from there you worked as a producer on the Golden Girls, correct?
No, that was a long time later.
Gotcha. Okay.
I don't pay attention to the calendar, so I don't know how much later, but like 4 or 5 years later.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Maybe 3 years. I don't know.
Mm-hmm, okay.
It's only my life.
Right. Because I know you mentioned though, like when working on the Jeffersons, you said because you came in when it was like later on in the series, that the difficult part was pitching stories, but then they had already written the stories, right?
Yeah. Imagine, well, a guy that I worked with at that time. So when I got there, it had been on the air, I think, 7 years already.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. So
imagine an imaginary dry cleaner in his living room. We were very limited with sets. It was a multi-camera show, and we couldn't like go all over. We had Imagining stories for a married couple. It's harder to write married stories than it is single people who are out chasing romance. And they had already done 150. So everything I would suggest as a newbie,
right?
Oh, that's a really good idea, but we did it already in season 4. Oh, that was a very good idea, we did it in season 6. So that was the hard thing. And one of the guys that worked on our show that later went on to produce Cheers, he said, this is so hard. We have to think of the 200th interesting thing to happen to this married dry cleaner. He said, only 2 interesting things have happened to me in my whole life. And I'm an interesting guy. So I always remember that. And well, as you and I have discussed, both in class and in real life,
right?
Thinking of stories and then breaking the stories. Thinking of an original premise or predicament for a character, and then structuring that in a interesting and workable way is the hardest part.
Right.
The jokes are, that's what everybody knows and remembers and thinks about. But, well, you know this, but it's the last layer, and it's, I'm not going to say easy, but it's easier than the story part.
Right, because you always said story comes first, then jokes.
100%.
Okay, so then what was the first show that you worked on as a showrunner?
It was that one, the Jeffersons.
Oh, it was? Cool.
Well, I started as a baby term writer where they just evaluate you every 10 weeks. So that was like, sort of nervous,
right.
Am I doing it right? And then I would like to say in this case, the progress made sense, but a lot of times it doesn't. A lot of times, just because a writer has schmoozed her or his way in and has an agent that kept her or him in, each year you get a higher title. I like to think I earned mine, but I went from the lowest rung to the executive producer rung by hanging in there and I guess earning the trust of the studio and the network. So yeah, that was my first experience. I did that with a partner. Show ran that with a partner, and was scared. Yeah, scared.
So yeah, you touched on my question. I was going to ask you, like, if you had trepidations going into it, or you felt ready.
Yeah, no.
Doing the show, you didn't.
No, well, I don't.
Or it's like learning as you go, kind of.
I don't think anybody would ever, if the person you were asking were telling the truth,
right?
He or she would never say, I felt ready. Because, by definition, not only everybody in show business, I think everybody, period, is insecure. True. We wouldn't have table manners if we weren't insecure. We wouldn't comb our hair. We wouldn't wear nice clothes. We want to be appreciated or liked. And we certainly on the job want to do the job well. And since comedy in particular is so subjective, how do I know? How do you know? How does anybody know that whatever choice I make is the best choice, is funny? So of course a thoughtful, sensitive person is going to say, I'm afraid, I don't know, I'm not sure. So a very wise friend who sadly died young, apparently smoking 4 packs of Winston's every day for 40 years is not good for you.
Who would have thought?
But he told me when I told him that I was afraid, and he had done this job before, on this very show, before me. He said, when you have to do it, you will do it. And so you sort of just grow into it.
Right.
Like, I don't know if you've ever done anything that you didn't feel ready for, but then you did it. That was that. But he also said, make sure that you have a strong opinion and follow through with that. Don't waver. Don't sit around musing, well, it could be this or it could be that. The scene could take place at a motel, but it might take place at a roadside mini mart. Have an opinion and assert it. And that's kind of true too. Somebody told me once, if you don't know how to pronounce a word, say it loud.
With confidence.
Yeah, because of harass, I don't know. But if you say harass, and everybody thinks, I thought it was harass, but he seems so very confident. And I don't want to say bullshit, But if you can justify your opinion and express it with authority, somebody has to be assertive, or nothing will get done.
Right.
Because comedy is so subjective, if you're like evaluating everything and listening to everybody and considering every perspective, you'll be there 2, 3, 4, 5, and often you're there until 2 a.m. anyway, but you'll never get anything done. So you do want, you've heard me say it before, all day long we're a democracy, at the end of the day we're a dictatorship, and the executive producer has to be the dictator or nothing will ever get done.
Right. So going off of that, can you talk a little bit about what a typical week of TV production was like from the standpoint of a showrunner and as a staff writer? Like kind of a comparison between the two.
Well, the staff writer has to worry only about her or his own script. Well, has to worry about the script, but also has to worry about kissing the ass of the showrunner. You do have to be. In Tina Fey's book, she says, I wouldn't hire anybody that I would be uncomfortable running into at 2 a.m. in her stocking feet. And I get that. So you don't want a prick on the staff. You don't want somebody that you don't like or can't get along, no matter how good they are at the job.
Right.
You don't want that, because it's so much togetherness in this cauldron all day for so many hours, and it's a very intimate thing to do, to throw out ideas. And if there's somebody rolling his eyes or saying, oh, you think that's funny? It's going to make everybody uncomfortable. It's going to inhibit everybody. The flow won't be good. So getting along with everybody is one of the things a term writer has to do. And then when it's time for that person to write his script or her script, do a good job. So that's really all they have to worry about. The showrunner, again, as you know and as your listeners know, is like the CEO. That person has to supervise all the writing and probably do some original writing on his own or her own, but also has to sit in the auditions for the actors, has to talk to the director about camera angles, has to make decisions about wardrobe, has to talk to the set designer about blocking. So and then also has to have the whole season in mind and keep the train moving, not just that week on that episode, but know what's coming up next week, know what's coming up in 3 weeks, know what's coming up in 2 months. And that's the big challenge. It's like, CEO, you're scheduling as well as you're doing something creative, you're doing something business-like.
Right. Yeah. So then you've sort of touched on this then, but what were the biggest challenges for you, specifically in the writer's room as a showrunner? Like different personalities?
Me personally, yeah. This really has nothing to do with writing. That my answer should be, the biggest challenges were coming up with original ideas and expressing them in a truthful and comedic manner. And that, of course, is the main part of the job. But you asked me what was my biggest, what was it? Biggest responsibility, biggest challenge?
Like biggest challenges that you experienced.
Yeah, you asked me what mine is. Like I said, it should have been about the writing. No, for me, it was because I have, and I blame this on my mother, I have a sensitive heart. So I can't stand it if somebody who might not be skillful is sitting in the room mute because that person can't keep up with the room. So and then I also can't stand the blowhard, show off loudmouth. So like a symphony orchestra conductor who might want to, subdue the brass section but bring out the strings a little bit. That's me. That was my biggest challenge, making sure that the dumbasses didn't know that they were dumbasses and that the loudmouth, pretentious pricks didn't get away with asserting their own prickiness.
Right.
So social director. And that shouldn't really be, the job's hard enough without that, but like I said, I blame my mom.
So then, what would you say for you personally, again, some of the most rewarding moments for you in your career?
That seems, like the first day was definitely rewarding. Sherman Hemsley, who was the star of this network television show, came to welcome me to the show. And the fact that he did that, I didn't know. I thought that I was so bumpkin from the Midwest, I thought that who you are on TV is who you are. So when he showed up with a t-shirt and jeans and was just talking regular, I thought he was a businessman in a three-piece suit every day. But his welcoming, that was definitely a warm thing. And then later, on a series for CBS called, in the mid-90s, called Bob. Bob Newhart was the star. Working with him was fantastic, and I don't know if you know, but before every performance that's in front of a live audience, the studio hires a warm-up comedian to get the audience laughing and then warmed up. And it's always, some nice, well-meaning young person, getting started. But Bob Newhart used to warm up the audience every Friday for that show. And normally during the other warm-up comedians, I would slink away to a bar or the prop room or something to drink beer. But when it was Bob Newhart, I stayed right there on the stage and listened, and it was like a Las Vegas lounge act for free in person on Friday. And he was great, and he was funny, and he was genuine, and so that was rewarding. It had nothing to do, I guess, with my job, certainly nothing to do with my career, but it was a definite highlight. One day, I don't know if you'll want to share this one or not, but I came to work one day, whatever year this was, and Larry Johnson, he used to be on the New York Knicks, but at that time he was on the Charlotte Hornets, I believe, and he got a contract, which is now de rigueur, but then it was $90 million. It was so much money. Wow. And Bob Newhart loves sports, and I love sports. And I said, you see what happened yesterday with Larry Johnson? And he said, off the cuff, he said, oh my God, yeah, it's unbelievable, $90 million. Do you know how much money that is? Jerry, he said, the Menendez brothers would have to kill their parents 6 times to make that kind of money.
Oh, wow.
And I still remember that ad lib, and it was better than anything I ever wrote for the show.
Okay, so do you have a favorite show you worked on, or a least favorite?
That one. That one by far, and yet nobody even knows what it is or even saw it. I have no idea why CBS buried it at 9:30 on Friday nights, and nobody watched it. And it was on for a full season and a half, but didn't get the numbers and then went away. But, I've been fortunate and worked on some really good stuff with some really good people. But for me, those episodes are the ones, and I was just like, I'm not going to say a flunky, but it wasn't my show. I didn't create it. I didn't run it. I was just on it. But those episodes I would hold up above everything personally that I've done. I'm not going to say the greatest thing ever on TV, but that I've ever done. Yeah. Bob, it was called Bob. It was not the one where he was a psychologist, not the one where he ran an inn in Vermont. He was a comic book illustrator.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I bet, see, you never even heard of it.
No, because obviously everyone knows the Bob Newhart show.
No,
that was,
it was just called Bob.
Oh, cool. So then, talking about the writing process itself, what's your personal favorite part? Is it breaking the story? Is it coming up with the jokes? What do you enjoy most about it?
Favorite part? None of it. Being done. No, it's hard.
I hear you.
And it's work. And you try, like whether it's guiding somebody on your staff or writing the script yourself, or at least I think everyone, including you, I get to sharpen these pencils. I got the tea, I got to go make a cup of tea. Oh man, I forgot to call my parents, I got to make a call. Anything but sit down and write. So, not trying to be a smartass, but no part of it is my favorite, unless you want to say, like other people, I don't like writing, I like having written. So finish it. Like somebody gave me the metaphor once of, do you know what it means to burp Tupperware?
No.
Do you know what Tupperware is?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if your generation saves food. But you seal all the edges, and then the last corner, when you snap it close, there's a little pss of the air, and you burp, and it's the seal is made. That's what it's like when you what if for several hours, and then you have a story that works. That's a favorite moment. Or you're kicking around, you need a button, you need a closing joke for a scene, you kick it around, how about this, and then you get one that works. That's like burping Tupperware. So burping, Tupperware, those are our favorite moments, and you have to have several of those for every episode. So my real answer is finishing, but burping, Tupperware, getting the story right, like putting the puzzle together and it fits. That.
Right. Yeah, very cool. Okay, so then I want to talk about now handling network notes from the standpoint as a showrunner. So for you personally, did you see network notes as like this hindrance that you had to just work in, or did you use it more as a creative tool when rewriting scripts?
I can say unequivocally, and yeah, because I'm now 3,000 miles from those Philistines, it's easier. Absolute hindrance. These people, I don't know how they get their jobs. That would be a mystery that I would love to solve, but you've heard it before, they have to have an opinion to justify their existence, but their opinion is based on nothing other than opinion. Like there was one development executive who made all of her executives write a script just so they could see how hard it is. And I always respected that. Because if you have done it and then you see how hard it is to keep everything flowing and logical and clear and still be funny and explanatory. If you see how hard it is, you'll be less likely to make a stupid suggestion. Like I always try to, like a cheap Kmart sweater, if you pull one thread, the whole sleeve falls off. That's what those executives never knew. And it's like they all went to a school where they learned one thing: raise the stakes, raise the stakes, raise the stakes. And they would always say raise the stakes, and I don't even think they knew what that meant. But part of it is not their fault. Part of it is like whoever hired them or defined the job, they have to show up at your run through and tell you to change this, that, or the other. And the changes so often, I'm not saying that they're not occasionally insightful, but whatever they say about a broken clock is right twice a day.
Oh yeah.
So occasionally they're right, but often they're like almost the enemy, because their little nips and bites and scratches and intrusions make the job harder, make the product at the end not organic. It's just like patchwork. And but I would like to say, this is another guy who died young. I'm sorry, but Brandon Tartikoff was the president of NBC, and he's the only guy I could at the time of their height, and he's the only guy I can remember at that high level, not just tolerating but respecting. And the main reason is because he said himself, all hits are flukes. And a guy who understands that and is not pompous and not arrogant, of course we try to control all the elements and make something into whatever we imagine is the best version that it could be, but that's still no guarantee that it's great. So he knew, let's try to make it as good as we can, but that doesn't guarantee success. There could be a shitty show, and there are many that prevail, and there could be some good shows that die the death of a dog.
Right.
So because he knew that, he didn't decree, he discussed. And that is a guy that I like and respect. But 90% of the other executives that most of us, that I've dealt with, and most of us have dealt with, they decree. They don't discuss. And you cannot decree in comedy. You can't say that this is absolutely the way to go. There's no absolute.
Right.
So now I forgot the original question, but like, are they a hindrance? Yeah. They're a hindrance. And that's why I think that I shouldn't say this because I don't know. I haven't worked on any shows in this new era of digital, streaming service.
Right.
But one of the reasons the shows are better now than in my opinion, than when I was working, is because they don't have to answer to network notes. They don't have to appeal to the whole entire United States of America at one time, which winds up reducing the product to pap. Now, like Curb Your Enthusiasm could never, I love it, and it could never exist on a network. It would be too Jewish, it would be too controversial, it would be too subtle, it would be too bold, it would be too cynical. But because it's on a cable channel, you need to appeal to fewer number of people to be considered a success. So these niche markets allow writers and thinkers and comedy people to be a little bit more authentic, sophisticated, private. You know, you don't have to appeal to the whole USA.
Right.
And look at the USA. Look at the USA. Like, oh man.
That's another thing. Okay, so what would you say are some misconceptions about TV comedy writing?
The biggest one, probably, and I tried it with you, and I try it with everybody, to demythologize the process. I don't want anybody thinking that you go stand on a pillar in the desert and then a brilliant bolt of lightning comes down and strikes you with a comic idea. And I don't know if that is a misconception or not a misconception, but nobody is gifted. Nobody does it by feel or by miracle. Everybody who's good has to sit down in a chair and grind it out. And so I like to, with my friends when I was working, or with you guys now when there's classes, I like to demythologize the process and point out that it's hard for everybody. Even me, I've done it 500 times, it's hard for me to start with a blank page still. So that. My first boss was Norman Lear. He's still at it in his 90s, and his company was called Tandem, T-A-T. And I never knew what that meant. And then I found out later, Tandem, he was in partners with another guy, but T-A-T was like an acronym or abbreviation for a Yiddish phrase, Tuchus auf Tisch, and it means put your ass in the chair.
Okay, yeah.
And so that ass in the chair is what's necessary. And so the misconception that people have that you're inspired, no, you work.
Right, like that's the initial thing, but then obviously you have to
sit in a chair and sweat. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so I purposely didn't mention this show when I listed off some of your credits, but you worked on the show Cousin Skeeter on Nickelodeon.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm curious to learn a little bit more about that experience and that job and your favorite takeaways from it.
I guess that you could infer from what I'm about to tell you that it was a life lesson, because I was in my 40s, I think, and I belonged to a very big, reputable theatrical agency, literary agency, and they got me the job. And I said, fuck, I'm a grown man, and I'm gonna work on a children's show where the star's a puppet. Oh God, this is humiliating. My life is sunk to nothing. My life has been a big, long, dark mistake, and this is horrible. And not only that, the offices and the soundstage were in a seedy, dirty, dangerous building downtown LA before downtown was cool. So it wasn't even like at a cool place like a studio like Paramount or Universal. It was like just in a warehouse in a bad part of Los Angeles. So fuck this show and children and fuck this downtown and this warehouse. I couldn't have been more wrong about either one. The show was an absolute delight. The working downtown away from the studio people with cell phones and Bluetooths in their ears, and like it was like we were free and separate and different, and there was like real people walking around the streets, not like Beverly Hills Hollywood kind of people. It was like both experiences were fantastic. The show was awful, like when I got there. And I would like to say that I made it mediocre. and guess what? It's harder to go from shit to mediocre than from mediocre to great.
Really?
Yeah. I don't even know how to explain that. But like there wasn't a lot to go. And then the other thing I have to mention is that I didn't know anything about puppets, but the puppeteer, the main guy, and in the main, so it was live action. It was like real people except the central character who was a puppet. But the puppet was operated by the single most talented person I've ever worked with in Hollywood. And I don't care to name any star. This puppeteer, I'll tell you his name, Drew Massey. He's brilliant. And he was just one of the characters in this Melissa McCarthy movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, cool.
But he's done like Men in Black and Crank Yankers and Muppets and Sesame Street. He's a genius. But he was the head. And then the arms were another person. And so what was real interesting was the arms were a beautiful young woman and he was a handsome young man, and they were like embraced with each other, sometimes 98-degree days outside when we were on location in the studio, rolling around embracing, and they were both engaged to other people at the time. I always thought that was kind of fascinating. But these two were so gifted, so brilliant, so talented. But because the central character was African-American puppet, and my friend, who's now a friend, the puppeteer Drew, is not African-American, they brought in an African-American comedian every week and paid him God knows how much to diminish the quality of the voice that he voiced over, so that the voice would be a black person, not a white person. And every week it took the brilliance down about 30%. So they were paying somebody to diminish the property. I wish you could hear the audio of the guy I'm talking about. So someday I hope that he makes an adult Skeeter kind of show where the central character is a puppet and everybody else is human, only it's for grown-ups.
Honestly, so much stuff is being rebooted nowadays. That's possible. Much stuff in TV. Okay, so talking more about the writing process itself.
Can I go back to one more thing about Skeeter?
Yeah, of course.
This is actually might be relevant to your listeners.
Cool.
What I worried about, there was real strict rules for children's TV, and I'm sure still are. You can't have anybody drinking alcohol. You can't have any scenes on the rooftop of a building. You can't do any body shaming of any other characters. You certainly can't have curse words or sex references. So to you, that might sound restrictive. And well, to me, it did sound restrictive. But like when you write a sonnet, it has to be 14 lines and rhyme in a certain way. Or if you are going to throw the discus in the Olympics, you have only that little circle to get your momentum. You can't just run across the whole football field and then throw the discus. You know, when you're limited by the form and then you succeed, it's way more satisfying. So there was that aspect too. If you can achieve funny without making fun of a fat kid, or without doing a below the belly button joke, or without having a drunk mom, and still you can be funny, that was another misconception I had. It turned out so my experience on this show was a good experience.
Nice. Yeah, so that more wholesome, but still making it funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so now
it's harder.
Yeah, I can imagine, because obviously when you don't have less restrictions, you could just have the dirty jokes and all that stuff.
I haven't seen you in a while. Have you seen Fleabag?
No. What? I don't know if I heard of that. What's...
Oh, you need to hear about Fleabag. I am so confounded by Fleabag because I like to keep the comedy. Like, what if there's a 8-year-old girl watching television with her dad, and then they're making jokes about butt sex, you know?
What the hell?
But it's so good that I'm confounded. So the Louisa May Alcott in me, who wants to say, no, don't do that. Same thing with Broad City.
I haven't seen it either. Yeah, I know it's on Comedy Central. Broad City.
Okay,
ended a couple years ago.
Don't tell your mom that I'm recommending these shows. They are so filthy that...
I've watched worse shows, honestly. Like, you know.
But these, I can't even... I'm like the kid in Home Alone with my hands on my cheeks, like, I can't believe what I'm seeing and hearing on television. But like I said, I'm confounded because they're so good. But guess what? They're good in the old-fashioned way that I'm talking about, where people stay up late, labor over breaking the stories, and then polish the scripts until they're really good. So you know, it's not just modern guidelines allow for sex jokes and so it's funnier. No, it's because these people do the work. Because there are shows like Two Broke Girls was filthy and it was not good, but these shows are filthy and they're real good. So I I have to think about that. That's like blowing my mind a little bit.
Because then there's shows
As Louisa May Alcott.
Right.
Yeah.
Because even like say a show like Girls, that show is filthy too. Like everything with more the niche market, like you're saying too. Like even shows on Netflix, you know.
Yeah, these two are way better than Girls. The two I'm telling you.
Is it? Oh,
Fleabag and Broad City are way better.
See, I know of Broad City. I'm not familiar with Fleabag. Not at all.
It's British and it's.
Okay, so that's another.
Yeah.
Aspects. They have different kind of humor too. Okay, so now I wanted to ask you, going back to the writing process itself, how you deal with writer's block, like your tricks for writer's block.
There's no trick. I mean, that's one interesting thing about TV, as opposed to a guy who's writing a novel or screenplay, where if you don't feel like you have it that day, so then you know, go to the batting cage and hit some baseballs or go take a walk. TV is like factory work. You have to go to work every day. You have to grind it out every day. So there are different days when and I don't think anybody would deny this. I mean, this is anecdotal and personal, but I don't think anybody would deny it. Days where you just don't have it, you know?
Right.
I find that not sleeping is helpful to comedy. Hangover is helpful to comedy. Feeling like shit is helpful to comedy. I don't know what Freud would say about that, but feeling like shit is. But you don't have the luxury of feeling like shit or feeling great. You just have to come to, and that's part of what I love about TV. Is like, you know, I come from like working class Midwestern small town, and I don't like the, you know, she screenwriter artiste, you know. I like roll up your sleeves, go to work, like it's like a real job. But the answer probably would be that, go back to that Norman Lear thing, TAT, Tuchus auf Tisch. If you ever read, no, you gotta grind it out. So writer's block is not a luxury that a TV staff writer could afford. Can't.
Because really, it's a process. So you think of story ideas, you pitch ideas, and you have the outline. So it's just, I guess if you look at it in that sense,
in steps, yeah.
Right.
And then in a way, I don't know if this is a tenuous a connection to make, but what I was telling you before about the friend who told me, when you have to do it, you'll do it, about show running.
Right.
Same thing with having to come up with an idea or having to write a first draft. When you have to do it, you do it. Maybe it won't be good, but you know, like we were talking before about how essential the story is. I always tell the young writers, get something down on paper. Let me see, whether it's the outline or the script. Don't worry about how funny it is. Let me see it. Then we can find out. We can pound out the seams later. We can see where it doesn't connect, where it doesn't fit, what's logic. Because just talking, you can come close, but you can't really you can't really know what you have. So grind it out. Tuchus auf Tisch. I don't speak German or Yiddish, but Tisch in German is table, so I don't really understand how it became ass in the chair, but that's what it means. Okay. Tuchus, everybody knows.
So now, what are your thoughts on the TV industry now compared to 30 years ago? And do you think it's easier or more difficult for up-and-coming writers to break into the field?
I guess I probably am not qualified to answer that because I don't know what's going on now. It's a talk about being confounded. It's confounding to me that, you know, when I started, there was 55 shows on television. There were only 3 networks. There was no Fox. And out of those 55, I don't know, at the most 20 were comedies. So it was hard to get a job on TV, on a TV show. Now there's like 450. But it seems like it's harder to break in. It was hard then. Like I said, if I knew, I would have been too afraid. But it was hard then, but it seems harder now. And that's a contradiction to me. There's so much more opportunity, so many more staffs, but why is it harder to break in? The only explanation I would have is that since the 1980s, people have found out about it. You know, like graduates of the great schools in the East, instead of going to Wall Street to get finance jobs, now they're going to Hollywood to get TV jobs. I don't know. That would be just my guess. But you know, as interesting as it would be to find out the actual reasons organic reasons for what I'm saying, it really doesn't matter because the process is still going to be the same. You have to write some material that means something personally to you, that is smart, decent, attention-getting. Then you have to get it in the hands of a gatekeeper, and then you have to be charming to that gatekeeper and get your shot. So the process is exactly the same. Whether it's harder or easier, kinda is beside the point.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So in that same vein, you touched on this, that years ago there were the three main networks. There was ABC, CBS, and NBC. Mm-hmm. But now we have cable channels, we have premium cable like HBO, there's streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime. Those are more and more prominent. So what are your thoughts on the benefits, but also the drawbacks of having all these ways to view content and so many markets for writers to explore?
No drawbacks. No drawbacks. This is lucky and fortunate and wonderful in the literal meaning of that adjective, full of wonder. You can do things, like I said before, in my era, I feel like old man talking, but in my era, you could not write anything original as a young writer. You could not. You would be laughed at, nobody would read it. Now you can be original, you can be personal, and when I first got off the airplane in California, it wasn't an airplane, I got out of my Volkswagen in Los Angeles, the first thing I heard was, whatever is personal is universal. And that remains true. Back then, though, you couldn't be personal. But now you can be personal. So there's no drawbacks. It's all to the advantage of the young writer, or the old writer, or just somebody who has a thought, an idea, or a passion that he or she wants to express. It's better now. And by the way, TV is better now. I look back and I wonder, why is nothing that I did as good as what's on the air now? And it's not because we were not capable, it's because of those network Philistines that I'm talking. They just, I recently had to clean out a closet and found some first drafts of old shows that I were. The first drafts were way better, not just a little bit better, way better than what went on the air. So imagine rewriting and making something that you care about worse because a dickhead told you to change it and you had to. That I think that's probably still going on, but probably not as severely as back then. Because of what we said before about niche markets, you don't have to be as broadly accepted as a network show would have to be. Like, I doubt if they're watching Curb Your Enthusiasm very much in small town Nebraska or Iowa, And if they did, they would, in the 90s, my black friends didn't get, a lot of them, they didn't get Seinfeld. It didn't resonate necessarily. So that doesn't mean it's not good. It just means, and so probably there's a lot of people in Iowa that would watch Issa Rae's show and not love that. So, but that's fine, and we can do that now, because you don't have to have 20 million viewers to be considered a success.
Right.
So I think, again, answering your original question, no drawbacks. It's better now, and
nice.
TV is better now.
That's reassuring to hear. Yeah, but they say we're in this golden age of television. Yeah. Okay, so then, in your opinion, what makes for a strong pilot or a show that you feel will resonate with generations of audiences?
Yeah, well, do you know that William Goldman died today or yesterday? He wrote Butch Cassidy. And that's a very sad day because I don't admire too many people in show business, but I admire that guy. And he wrote Adventures in the Screen Trade, I don't know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I don't know how old the book is, but it's so insightful and breezy reading too. Even if you don't care about show business, it's still entertaining too. He's the one who coined the phrase about all of show business. He said, nobody knows anything. And then he said, I remember, this is such an important precept, I'm going to repeat it in all uppercase letters, nobody knows anything. And it's true. If people knew, then everything that person did would be a success or a hit. But back to Tartikoff, all hits are flukes. So I can't answer your question with any specifics about what it takes to make a enduring success. But when you are, well, you start with, if you can, and it's hard to do this. It's easier to do this with a play or a novel, but it's hard on TV to start with passion. But you should, if you could, start with something that is emotionally meaningful to you. And then if I'm right, and I think I am, that whatever's personal is universal, that's a good start. But after that, after you hone and polish and sharpen and go over, there's no guarantee that that's going to endure. You know, like we said before, there are great shows that have died the death of a dog, and there are shitty ones that have endured.
Right.
So that's part of what I hate about show business, part of what I love about show business too, that it's not an exact science, it's not a meritocracy, but still, you try to behave as though it is. So when you're writing is the most important part. When you're casting is 100% the most important part. When you're performing it, that's the most important part. And then when you're editing it, that's the most important part.
I see.
So if you're, conscientious, you give your maximum effort to each stage and then sit back and process. It's probably something like being a parent. I'm not one, but you do your best, and then at some point you step back and say, oh, I hope this kid doesn't fuck up and buy heroin in Staten Island. I hope.
Okay, so I also wanted to ask you, what's your favorite thing about teaching aspiring television writers?
I can actually answer that. They're not fucked up by big money yet. So you might turn out to be a prick when you get to Hollywood and get successful. So far, I like you and you're a nice person. Because, and all joking aside, in New York in these classes, you can remember, there have been some really smart, sensitive, insightful people.
Yeah.
And they, for the most part, they are humble, they cooperate, they're like the stocking feet with Tina Fey at 2 a.m. Because nobody's kissing their ass, nobody's giving them a 3-picture deal, nobody's giving them the first table at the best restaurant in Los Angeles, nobody is measuring their salaries, They're doing it because they love language, they love storytelling, they love laughter. And I mean, you and I have that in common, and so that we can laugh and relate and have fun and do good work. But I don't think it'll happen to you, honestly, and it didn't happen to me, but people get caught up in narcissism and careerism in Hollywood. And, it's so competitive and it's so cutthroat. That's why it happens. But I like what we're doing now. We don't make the kind of money that they make in Hollywood, but it's the money, I think, that fucks people up. Like just chasing that, wanting that money and status.
Okay.
Then you're not genuine anymore. A couple of years ago, I went to Russia to help produce a version of Married with Children for Russian television, and I was so burned out and cynical and angry about Hollywood, and still am. But went to Russia, scared as could be. I don't speak Russian, but these people, TV in Russia is like the 1950s TV here. They're not esteemed or famous or highly paid or have big contracts or deals, or so they were there for the reasons I'm saying: love language, love storytelling, love humor, and it was bliss to come to work and think and share and bounce ideas. Then I went back to Hollywood, and then the same, that competitive, narcissistic, look what I did, grinding you underfoot. I couldn't, I like it. I like our classrooms better. And I will tell you that I've been on some high-paid, top-level staffs, and I have friends who would probably smack me for saying this and disagree for sure, but that if I picked the 6 best people out of our classes, it would be better than the 6 people that Hollywood is paying like $20,000 a week. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That says a lot.
So it's not a meritocracy. So what was the question? Like what? Because I want to.
Your favorite thing about teaching aspiring writers
is that the people in our rooms here care about to craft.
Right.
I'm not going to call it an art. It's not an art. It's a craft, which I don't apologize for. It's like, we're commercial artists. We're not creative artists. We have to fit the form. The form was there before. But they care about that and each other, not about ego and money. And now they'll eventually, many of them will turn into that. That's what success will do. Success in quotation marks. But that's what I like the best is the genuineness of the reason that we're all sitting in the room.
Okay, so this has all been extremely insightful, and I really appreciate all of this. So before we wrap up, I just want to ask you if you have any other tips for young writers trying to make it into the business.
Like if there was a magic bullet or something, I would share it. But I think, TAT. TAT. I mean, like be honest. Start with something that you emotionally care about. That's truthful. Talk to anybody and everybody that you can, because as I said earlier, anybody can turn out to be somebody, and all these perspectives, you'll cull through the ones that are bullshit and then the ones that make sense, and then ultimately be the decent person that Tina Fey is talking about, and put your ass in a chair like Norman Lear was talking about, and do the work. Classes help, talking to experienced people help, reading books help, reading scripts helps.
Right.
I didn't have that. Like, I had to watch TV to learn how to write TV. But now you can get almost any script online, right?
Yeah.
And so reading helps too. Not only watching and listening, but reading.
Right.
But then it just comes down to like how much effort are you willing to put in?
All right, that was my interview with Jerry Perzigian. Big thanks again, Jerry, for joining me this week. And with that, that's going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Storytelling Saga, as well as on Twitter at Storytell Saga. You can also send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by leaving me a message in the contact section of storytellingsaga.com, or by sending me an email at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week, the best way to spread Christmas cheer is singing loud for all to hear. I'll be kicking off the holiday season by discussing Elf. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.